One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Hello today. This is one of those episodes where you're going to want to take notes. You're going to want to listen back. And I hope you are as excited about this as I am, because Buzzsprout has a brand new feature that we have to talk about, because I think it is a game changer. Okay. We're going to approach this from several different ways today. We're going to talk about it as someone who is a podcaster that wants to promote their show and get more downloads, more listeners. And then we're also going to take the angle of someone who's a podcast host that wants to monetize their show. So you probably just perked up as like for both of those, because I'm super excited to talk about them. But we are talking about Buzzsprout's brand new feature, Buzzsprout Ads. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? So like I said in the beginning, this is going to be a super juicy, meaty episode, and it all revolves around Buzzsprout Ads. Now, if you did not know about this brand new feature, it's because it's something that's been slowly rolled out over the last few weeks. I was contacted by the Buzzsprout team because I'm a creator and I've worked closely with them for several years. And I got to see and hear all about the beta project. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a game changer for podcasters. So let's talk about the requirements first, because I know that if you're like, well, I'm not on Buzzsprout, then this may not apply to you. But it may be a reason to switch. Okay. I'm just going to throw that out there because y'all know if you've listened to the podcast before, I have used Buzzsprout since day one. I advocate for them. I'm one of the biggest brand ambassadors of all the amazing things that they do. I've met the founders of the company, like had dinner with them. Like they are so incredible. And I'm just really excited to share about the amazing things that they're doing. And so we're going to approach this today from the assumption that if you're listening to this, you have a Buzzsprout podcast or you have plans to have like host your show on Buzzsprout. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, we're going to first cover all the things that you need to know about creating ads as a promoter for your podcast, like what this looks like and the process. And then we're going to cover the monetization side for those of you, if you're like, I have no desire to promote my podcast or spend money like advertising dollars on promotions right now. I want to make money on my podcast. We're going to cover both today. So let's dive in first for creating ads as a promoter and why I think doing ads on other people's podcast is way more effective than running ads on Facebook, Instagram, Google Ads for your podcast. Okay, I'm not against using these other platforms for your launches and your promotions and your live events and all those other things. But when it comes to ads for your podcast, I think the best place to invest your dollars is on platforms where people are going to hear it on someone else's podcast. Like if you already have someone, you have a captive audience that they are proving to you, they already listen to podcast, then the percentage of them transitioning over to your show is so much higher than you running ads to, let's say, an Instagram audience. And you're like, shooting in the dark as to whether or not they even listen to podcasts on a regular basis, right? You don't know that. You have no idea. They could be, they only consume content on YouTube or on TikTok. And all of a sudden you're like, I just wasted a bunch of money on ads and they're not converting. Whereas with Buzzsprout ads, I see the ability to create ads and you're playing them on other Buzzsprout podcasts. This is what is so stinking cool. So I have a lot of resources and really cool stuff that I'm going to share in the show notes. So crystalprofit.com/episode 358 is where you're going to find all the Buzzsprout articles that they have. And they have some really awesome YouTube content that I'm going to link to, as well as some of my own YouTube demonstration videos that I've created. They're not out yet, but they will be coming out over the next few weeks. So once those are live, I'll link to those in the show notes as well. But let's dive into why they did this. So if you go to buzzsprout.com/ads, you're going to see all the information that I'm going over today. But I know a lot of you are like, Crystal, give me the highlights, give me the important stuff I need to know. So one of the things that they have as soon as you land on this page is a quote that says 45% of weekly listeners learn about new podcasts from other podcasts. This is from the Westwood One Podcast Report. And I think it's so interesting if you take a pause for a second and ask yourself, where do I learn about other podcasts? It's probably from another show. Like if you listen to this show and you heard Aubrey Malik's recent episode, maybe you went and listened to her show, or maybe you've heard someone previously here that you've never heard of anywhere else. And now you're like, oh, you know what? I think I want to go check out their podcast. Like it's how I learn about other podcasts. I hear it from other people or people that are on other shows that I listen to. Like that is where I learn about other podcasts. So the idea here is you're creating ads that are going to be placed on other podcasts distributed on Buzzsprout. And so what Buzzsprout did is they created this technology that allows for an optimized mid-roll placement. So what this does, and I'm just reading this verbatim, what Buzzsprout has on their site, it says mid-rolls are the most valuable ad placements and account for 76% of podcast ad revenue. Every ad on the Buzzsprout Ads network will benefit from this premium placement. I get asked all the time, y'all, when I started talking about the dynamic content on Buzzsprout, which was released last January. So January 2021 is when I believe this was made public to all Buzzsprout users. Dynamic content, I get asked about all the time. Should I put it at the pre-roll or the post-roll? And honestly, I'm always like, I wish there was an option number 3 to have a mid-roll placement because it really is the most effective. It's the one that I listen to on other podcasts. I'll fast forward through the beginning on some shows. I will stop listening if I know it's just a bunch of ads at the end. But the ones in the middle, I don't always fast forward through those. I typically listen to them, especially if they're not super long. So I agree here. It is a premium placement, and your ad that you create will be played in this premium placement. Now, I don't know the technological, like how they choose where this goes. And we'll get into some of the more details about, how long an episode has to be before it's placed on, an ad is placed within an episode. But I think it's just amazing because I've heard some of these. If you listen to my podcast recently, maybe the one you're listening to today, it's going to have an ad placed in there, and it is placed at a really awesome place on the episode. I think if we were doing a drinking game, you would have had to drink so many times for the word place. Place or placement. I said it like 5 times in a row, and I heard it every single time. I'm like, wow, I just said place a lot of times. There it is. I said it again. Place, place, place. Okay, there we go. I'm done. I promise. Now, let's talk about finding listeners interested in your topic. So what Buzzsprout Ads does is it connects you with shows in your podcast categories to make sure you get in front of the right listeners. So it reaches audiences interested in your specific category. So for instance, and I'm going to go through exactly which categories the Profit Podcast is listed, but I wouldn't want my show listed in a football or sports category. That doesn't make any sense. Why would someone who has a football podcast want to air an advertisement for something about my show? I mean, I guess it could work, right? Like maybe there would be a few people, but I think that my show would be better suited for entrepreneurship, marketing, education, how-to, because those are the categories where my podcast already lives. And then another thing that I want to make very, very clear, I'm going to throw out some disclaimers here because maybe there's some of you that are listening and you're like, wait, I have a Buzzsprout podcast. Does this mean that they're just going to start shoving ads like other players do? I'm not going to name names, but come on, you know who I'm talking about. There's other places out there that will throw ads in front of your content, whether it's a podcast or it's a video. Like we've all seen this where you see something that's monetized and you're like, wait, I don't think that person even knows that ad is there because it does not align with the messaging that they have. Like it's one of those where I will never forget my mom telling me this because she's really into gardening. And she was saying, it's all organic. She uses all organic, like sprays and oils and different stuff like that is natural for her garden. But then she started seeing on some of her videos or videos related to her like organic way of gardening, there were Roundup and all these like really highly toxic chemicals that were being promoted on her stuff. And she was like, what the hell? Like, seriously? This is getting promoted on my stuff? Like, this is so not incongruent, or wait, it is incongruent with what I'm all about. And so this is your disclaimer that Buzzsprout won't do this. They won't put anything on your show that you haven't previously said yes to. So I wanted to make that very abundantly clear. But one of the things that they also emphasize is privacy focused. So they talk about listening to a podcast shouldn't trigger any kind of invasive privacy tracking. So y'all know, we all have been there. You start talking about something in a room with your friends, and then 2 seconds later, you get on your phone and you have like 17 ads for that thing that you were talking about. And you're like, how did they know? Like what's happening? How, like, I didn't even Google search this. Why is this popping up? And it's not something that I talk about all the time. So this is weird. It's creepy. We've all been there and it happens. So Buzzsprout wants you to know they don't do any kind of creepy stuff like that. They want you to have the tools that you need to target your ad campaign effectively without stepping on the rights of listeners. And this is really important to them. And again, it's why I love this organization so much, because of the way they have carefully thought about all this. Like, they could do all the creepy things that happen behind the scenes with Instagram and Facebook ads. If you don't know, there's a whole world of, ooh, is that right? Like, a lot of that stuff is going on behind the scenes. And so just know the Buzzsprout is not doing any of that stuff, and they have no plans to in the future. But now let's get into what it looks like to actually run an ad on Buzzsprout. I do have a YouTube video coming out about this. As me recording this, it's not out, but it is coming out soon, where I'm showing you step by step what I did to create my second ad for them. Because when the beta launch happened, I did send them like my audio file and the text that I wanted. I didn't love it, y'all. There's some really good examples of how you can create a really good ad on the main page. Mine wasn't on there, and I think it's because I didn't love what I did. They probably didn't love what I did, so it's okay. It's no harm done, no hurt feelings, but I'm just like, it really wasn't that good. So now that I've created one, I learned from it. What you have to do in order to run an ad on Buzzsprout Ads is step one, and again, all this is going to be listed in the show notes. So again, crystalprofit.com/episode 358. But what you have to do is, number one, create a 40-second promotional ad. And it has to be 40 seconds. I tried to squeeze in 42 seconds and a 45-second clip. Nope, it's got to be 40 seconds or less. I think it's between 12 and 40 seconds. And you're like, Crystal, that sounds really short. It is really short. It's meant to be a very quick call to action, something that will compel someone to go check out your podcast. And here is my recommendation, and I talk about this more in depth, and I actually show you what my whole ad is in my YouTube video. But what I did because I'm just like, well, what am I supposed to say? If you've never done an ad before and you're totally lost, you're like, I have no idea, where do I even start? Start with the information that you have in your podcast description in your Buzzsprout settings. So navigate over to your settings or your podcast info, and then look at your description. This is typically where you'll say what your show is about, who your audience is for. Start with something like that, but have an intentional call to action that says, if you're this type of listener, then you would really enjoy the Profit Podcast. So make sure you click the link in the show notes to go listen today. That's a very simple call to action, but it is part of what I included in my ad. And again, just be on the lookout for the YouTube video that's going to show you all the things that I did to create my 40-second promotional ad. So after that's done, you'll need to create some ad text. So this is what's going to show in other Buzzsprout podcasts. And if you're listening to this today, there may be podcasts that are being advertised as you're listening. Maybe you just heard one. Maybe you're about to hear one, but you will see that the podcast artwork changes. So if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, you will see when one of these ads happen, the artwork changes. It goes from the Profit Podcast to the podcast that is running an ad on this show. And it's going to have a headline as well as a link that's like a text that's in the episode description where you're listening. I'm not talking about in the show notes. I'm talking about in the episode description on your phone, on your device where you're listening. It's going to say at the bottom, like under the description that I typically write for my show. It's like an episode description of everything we're going to talk about here today. And then underneath that, it is going to be in there. There's going to be a title of the show and a link describing what that podcast is about. It's also going to have some subscribe links to the directories where someone could click on that and immediately go listen. All of this is laid out in the link that I'm going to share with you for you to go learn more about Buzzsprout Ads. So you don't have to memorize everything I just said. They're all going to be in the show notes too. But I just wanted to share a little bit about what to expect for you to have ready before you ever go and create an ad. Like these are some of the things that you should think about. Maybe brainstorm some of the best ways that you can have a quick call to action or information that you can share. Think about it in a Google Doc or somewhere else. Maybe you have someone that you can brainstorm this with. But once that's done, you'll actually go through the process of creating an ad, and you'll have to upload your audio. You'll have to put in all the information that we just talked about, and then you'll have to choose your target audience. Now, when it comes to your target audience, this means you're going to be selecting the age range. So it's like the demographic information about who your podcast is targeting, right? Who are you trying to reach? Who's your ideal audience? So for me, I put all ages. So mine isn't restricted to just 24 to 45-year-olds, right? Anybody could listen to this podcast and find value. And then all sexes. So there might be some podcast, and yours could be included in that, where it's mostly a male audience or mostly a female audience. For my content, it's not gender specific at all. Like you could, be anything and listen to this podcast. And then also the categories. Oh, wait, hang on. Sorry, I skipped over one. That's an important one. And the next one is profanity. This one was a good choice, I think, on their part, simply because you could listen to a podcast and then hear a promotion on there, and then all of a sudden there's a ton of profanity. Please don't put a bunch of profanity in your ad. I don't care if you cuss on your podcast, but don't put a bunch of profanity on your ad, because it's less likely that someone will select that. Unless that they're totally open to it, it's fine. But I would just go with the default of not having a bunch of profanity in the 40-second ad that you're going to run, and then just letting people know like, hey, this is typically explicit, because you can mark that as your target audience, people that don't care if your show is explicit. Okay, then the next thing to talk about. So for my show, I put occasional, right? Because we're not totally clean around here, but we're also not an explicit podcast. So I put the occasional profanity is what you will find on this show. And then for categories, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but you want to make sure that you are selecting something that is going to align with your target audience. Y'all, my target audience isn't a football. Like maybe y'all do love football, but that's not why you listen to this show. You are likely interested in how-to stuff, marketing, entrepreneurship, business. These are the reasons why you listen to this podcast. And so therefore, those are the podcasts I am trying to target. The how-to category, the entrepreneurship, the business and marketing. Those are the ones where I would love for those shows to play my ad. All right. And then the last thing is you have to choose your promotional plan. Now, this is the big disclaimer. This is the big thing that I really want to make sure you pay attention to here, because on the website, when you're signing up for ads, it will say you can buy 5,000 downloads for $100. What does that mean?
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
This does not mean that you are buying downloads for your podcast. I just want to make this like abundantly clear that you are not buying downloads. So if I pay them $100, I'm not going to see 5,000 downloads show up in my stats on the Profit Podcast. That is not what is happening. What is happening is when you pay for 5,000 downloads, it means that you are paying for every time someone plays an ad for your podcast. Does this mean that I'm reaching 5,000 individual people? Well, no, because on my show, you'll hear an ad. Maybe, let's say you binge listen to 3 episodes, you might hear an ad for the same podcast. And those are 3 different episodes or 3 different downloads where you are hearing that ad. Those are 3 different downloads. All right. That's not just one person. And then that it only counts once because it's one IP address. It counts for every single download. But for those of you that are brand new to advertising or to marketing, especially, paid advertising, then what it's doing is you will see multiple ads if you run Instagram ads, or maybe you're on your Facebook and you see the same, you're like, gosh, I've seen this ad. I see this ad all the time. There's a reason for that, y'all. It takes more than someone hearing something or seeing something one time for some things to really click. Maybe someone needs to hear your ad 3 times in a row for them to be like, you know what? I like the sound of her voice, or I like her vibe. I like the things that she's covering on her podcast. Maybe I should go check it out. So I am completely fine that this is based on per downloads and not per person. So I just wanted to do some clarification on that. So what I did, and I'm really excited because I'm going to run a debrief of what happened after I started running ads. So what I opted to do, and this is what I show you in my YouTube video, I signed up for the 10,000 download plan, which right now, all of their ads are discounted as it's the rollout because they're launching it. I don't know when they're going to change that. Let me throw that out as a disclaimer. Don't come at me and say, you said it was this price, but it was this now. What I did is I bought 10,000 downloads for $140. It is typically $200, but it's at a discount. It's 30% off right now. Again, I don't know how long that's going to last. If you're listening to this a few years from now, I have no idea what the price is going to be, but that's what it is right now in 2022 when I'm recording this episode. So the prices stagger from 5,000 downloads for $100 or $70 right now. If you want to get started with ads, you could pay $70 and your ad would be downloaded 5,000 times. Amazing, right? Super, super cool. Or you could scale all the way up to 50,000 for $1,000 or $700 right now. And y'all, just to be clear, I don't get paid for promoting this. They're not paying me to promote this. I'm just really excited because this is super cheap. This is very, very cheap. If you've ever run ads on Facebook and Instagram, it's kind of a crapshoot on whether you're really going to get the most bang for your buck. This is on average 2 cents per download. So that could potentially be 2 cents per lead of people that are coming to your podcast to listen. And who knows, maybe they won't all turn into lifelong subscribers or people that stick around for months and months and months. But again, you could get started for $70 for 5,000 downloads as an experiment. So maybe you need to save up to make this happen, but I recommend everybody listening to this to try it. I think if you are willing, and that's sometimes what paid advertising is, it's a gamble. Y'all, $70 is way, way cheaper than it is to gamble on other paid advertising platforms where you're not sure if you're ever going to see a return, or your copy could be terrible on Instagram, or it could get rejected 1,000 times on Facebook as you're trying to run an ad, or it's not shown to the right audience. You are going to be advertising to podcast listeners, to other people that already listen to podcast. So the percentages of you having a good marketing outcome are so much higher starting with ads this way. Okay, now we're going to flip the script. I know this is going to be a super long episode today. I warned y'all at the beginning because we're almost at 30 minutes here and we're just halfway through. So that was the idea of creating ads to run as a promotion, right? You're trying to promote your podcast. Now let's talk about monetizing your podcast by running ads as a podcast host. Now, again, I'm going to read a lot of this language that is straight from Buzzsprout's website, and I'm going to link to it. Again, the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 358. I'm going to link to all this information, but I'm just going to start from the top. So Buzzsprout states, get paid with Buzzsprout Ads, and they let you know that this is the beta version. This is what you're going to see if you navigate over, you're in your Buzzsprout account, and you go over to Podcast Monetization. This is what you're going to see. Everything that I'm reading here today is going to be what you see there. So it says, make money by promoting other podcasts on your show. Buzzsprout Ads allow you to run advertisements for other podcasts within your episodes. It's easy. You have full control. I said that weird. Full control, and you get paid. So what they're talking about here is you are monetizing your podcast through Buzzsprout, so you don't have to go out and find sponsors, find people that will pay you to play ads on your show. Like, you're in complete control of how this works. So as new ads enter the system, you'll be given an opportunity to review the ad before deciding to approve or decline. So if you approve the ad, the system will begin inserting the ad into your episodes. You can change your mind at any point and the system will remove the ad. And as I've started adding and declining ads, there's something that you should know. So before anything gets played on your show, you get to listen to it. You can see the title and you can see the description. So we talked about that earlier. When someone's creating an ad, you have to have your title, your headline, and a description. You get to see all of that. So if at any point you listen to the audio and you're like, this audio is terrible, you can put that, because there's actually a place for feedback. When you decline something, it will say it's not a good fit, you're not interested, it was poor audio quality, or another reason that they're trying to learn as much as they can as this rolls out. But typically what happens for me is my podcast monetization will be full of all these new ads, and I'll listen to them. And for the most part, I go with my gut feeling and I'm like, that's just not a good fit for my audience. Or, oh my gosh, the audio quality is terrible on this. I would never want to run this on my show. Or I read just the top headline. I don't even listen to it. And I'm like, this is not a good fit for my audience. So you have all the control, which I think is amazing. But then you click, add this ad, and then it goes to another section. But if at any point you're like, you know what? I thought about it. I slept on it. I don't really want that ad on my show. Take it off. You just hit this button and it removes it. Very, very cool. Super intuitive, easy to use. So let's keep going. So it says all ads are from like-minded podcasters. So Buzzsprout Ads look for podcasts in similar categories to find the best matches. This ensures that the content will be interesting to your audience and effective for the advertiser. Again, you don't want to be on a football podcast if your show is about cooking and you're like, this doesn't, the art of French cooking. Julia Child just popped into my head. And I'm just like, I don't know that would translate super well to like a fantasy football podcast, but I'm just throwing it out there. Like, you want to make sure that everything aligns in a really good way. Let's go on to the next point that they have. So it says the simplest way to get paid for your podcast. So all ads pay the same. It's 1.4 cents USD per monetized download. So when the beta, I just said 1.4 cents. Yeah, that's right. Okay. I was like, wait, I think I read that wrong, but no, it's good. It says when the beta concludes, we'll provide options for you to collect your earnings. So this is actually a question that I asked. We have like a chat set up for all the Buzzsprout creators, and I sent this to them today actually. And I was like, hey, I see that I have a balance. I already have like $24 that's like hanging out in my balance. And I said, how is this going to be paid out? And they were like, we're working on that. It's going to happen. They're going to have some sort of Buzzsprout wallet set up. I don't know all the details about how this is all going to work, but you're going to have a way to collect your earnings. I don't know if that's going to be a PayPal system that they set up to where they pay you via PayPal once a month, or as you reach a certain threshold. Those are some of the details that haven't completely been worked out. But again, this just rolled out. So they are still fine-tuning some of the things that they need to figure out before everything is working like a well-oiled machine. But again, I'm just excited that this money is going to cover some of my expenses. That's what I'm really excited about. I'm like, oh, I have like 3 softwares that I need to cover every single month that are pretty pricey. And I'm like, you know what? This might be the thing that covers these. It's probably not going to make me millions of dollars or even thousands of dollars having these ads on my podcast, but it will improve the idea of having sponsors on my show. And also we're lifting each other up in the community. So yeah, I love it for those reasons. Now let's keep going. So automatic mid-roll insertions. We talked about this earlier, but Buzzsprout uses smart insertion technology to automatically find the correct number and the best location for ad breaks in your episodes. So you don't have to worry about labor-intensive manual ad breaks. They do that for you. So what you'll do is you'll select if you want to have like an audio clip that plays right before someone else's, like their ad plays. It could be music. It could be someone saying, let's take a quick break. They have all these preloaded into the podcast monetization. Like when you go into Buzzsprout Ads, you can change what happens right before an ad is played and right after. So if you want to have music, or you want to have a female voice that says, let's take a quick break, or a male voice that says, we'll be right back. They have a lot of those ads, and they also give you the flexibility to upload your own. So if you want to have a mid-roll insertion, it's like, hey guys, we're going to hear from another Buzzsprout podcast in this community. Then you could add that in. That way it's not such a jarring experience for your audience if you've never run ads on your show before. And again, I was like saying all that, and that's actually our next point here, but it says beautiful transitions and appropriate durations. So when an ad is about to begin, Buzzsprout will insert a musical audio cue for your listeners. This lets your audience know that an ad will be starting soon and serves as a nice transition between various audio styles. All ads are 40 seconds or less. So I think about this kind of like if you've ever watched a YouTube video and it will say ads start in 5, 4, 3, 2, like it counts down before there's a mid-roll ad on a YouTube video. So it's just letting you know like, hey, this is coming. That way you're not so like, wait, what just happened? Did it go to a totally different video? And the same thing for podcasts. You'll hear, I'm thinking of the Smart List podcast where they say, and we'll be right back. And then it goes into their ads. And then at the end, when all the ads are done playing, it'll say, okay, now back to the show. That's exactly what they're talking about here, that transition from ad to your regular podcast episode. And then the last point that they have here is automatic ad renewal. So when the ad buy is fulfilled, Buzzsprout Ads will automatically remove the ads and your episodes will be returned to the ad-free state they were in when you first published. So if you put out an ad, and I'm thinking of from the marketer's perspective, right? From what we were talking about at the very beginning, if you put out an ad and then you hit that threshold of 5,000 or 10,000 downloads, well, at that point, like you're done. That ad has run its course and you will either have to renew and buy another package, or you could just be done for a while. And this is one of those things, like I'm curious to see how long, like how much I get for, I guess not how much, because I know exactly how much I'm going to get 10,000 downloads for what I purchased, but I'll be curious to see how long that lasts. Is that going to be, a month? Is it going to be 2 weeks? Is it going to be a week and a half? I have no idea at this point because this is my first time to do it. But what will happen is once it's done, the ads that I created will be removed from all the podcasts where that ad was running. I like this simply because if I wanted to, I could reuse that same ad or I could create something new. So, and this is probably what I'm going to do. That way, podcasters that have chosen to run my ad to monetize their show, They're not like, oh my gosh, I've run the same ad for 2 months for this one podcast and it's the same thing. My audience is sick of hearing it. I'm going to skip over it this month and I'm going to decide to run other ads. No. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to keep things fresh. I'm going to keep things moving forward in a way that is a pleasant experience for my show, right? To hopefully get people to come listen to my podcast, but it's also good for the podcast host that want to run ads on their show. Now, for the finale, because I know you're wondering, and I probably should have started with this information, but for some reason it's at the bottom. And thank you so much for listening to this point, because now we're going to cover the eligibility requirements, because not all podcasts will be able to monetize with Buzzsprout ads. I know it's the unfortunate, I guess I saved the worst part of it for last instead of saying I saved the best for last, because some of y'all are going to come at me and say, Crystal, I don't have that. I can't do it yet. But that's the thing, is the word yet. Maybe you don't have these eligibility requirements yet, but at the same time, these are totally doable. They are absolutely not unreasonable for Buzzsprout to have these qualifications. It's not like you have to have 10,000 subscribers on Instagram like you used to have the swipe up feature that nobody was happy about. Yeah, I still don't have 10,000 people on YouTube. Y'all, I said subscribers. You know what I meant. Followers on Instagram. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? We used to have 10,000 followers on Instagram to get the swipe up feature. That's not cool. Come on. That's not fun for anybody. Now they have the link feature and anybody can put a link on their stories, which is incredible, amazing. So what's going on here is you have to have, this is step number 1, you have to have 5 published episodes. So if you're just getting started, you got to have at least 5 episodes. The second requirement is you have to have 1,000 downloads in the last 30 days. Now, some of you are like, Crystal, I'm not there. I am not there yet. Again, let's use the word yet, because you can get there. Because the more downloads, or the more you keep podcasting, the more downloads you will have. Because most of my downloads today aren't necessarily from the episode that I recently published. Like this episode won't get 1,000 downloads in the next 30 days, but the other episodes, the backlog of episodes, those are still getting found. So let's pretend that someone hears an ad on someone else's show. They find my show. They're going to go back and listen to the backlog of episodes. They're not just going to listen to the latest episode. They're going to say, what else does she have on here? Because this is what I do. When I find a new podcast, I scroll through their backlog and I'm like, oh my gosh, they had that guest? This is what they talk about? Of course I'm going to go listen to it. So just keep that in mind. If you're not there yet, if you don't have 1,000 downloads in the last 30 days, don't sweat it. You can absolutely get there. And then number 3, the third eligibility requirement is your episodes have to be at least 23 minutes long. This is one of those wah, wah, because it won't apply to everybody. Because if you're like, well, Crystal, my episodes are only 15 minutes long. Well, then you can't monetize with Buzzsprout ads. I don't know. I can't go and plead to the team and say, but please just let this one podcast, there's no budging on this. It has to do with the tool that allows for the mid-roll insertion. From the technical standpoint, that's all I know. I don't know anything else because my other podcast, The Potty Report, isn't eligible. If you've listened to it, it's 5 minutes or less. Why would it make sense to have a 40-second ad on a 5-minute or less podcast? So if there's a 3-minute episode, you're going to take up 40 seconds to play an ad on a 3-minute episode. It doesn't make sense. So I get it from that standpoint, and they had to draw a line somewhere, and apparently it was at 23 minutes. So that's what I know about that. Then the fourth requirement is you have to have a verified email. This shouldn't be an issue if you are an active Buzzsprout user. I'm sure you've already verified your email, and that's not a problem, but it's something that they have to put out there that you must have a verified email address. Number 5, your show has to be in 3 podcast categories. Now, the reason for this, and this is my assumption, so I guess I shouldn't say the reason, my assumption for why they did this is because they want you to have the most options possible. And you can't really do that if you only have one category. So if you are only in one category for your podcast, I highly recommend you going back and opting in to have at least 3 categories related to what your podcast is about. So go into your settings and choose 3 categories for your podcast. And then the 6th and final requirement that you have to have is you have to be on a paid plan for Buzzsprout. So unfortunately, if you're on a free plan, you can't monetize your podcast. I understand that. I get why this is happening because they don't want you just making money and you're not even paying to use their platform. Like, monetize your podcast and then that could pay for your podcast hosting. Because like I said, I've already hit, I think it was like $24 when I checked it before I started recording this episode. That would pay for the most expensive plan on Buzzsprout right there. And it's only been, I think, like a week that I started monetizing. So it's absolutely doable to make some cash and have it pay for your Buzzsprout plan at the bare minimum. Y'all, my throat hurts from speaking for 40 something minutes at this point. We covered so much, and there's just so much more to talk about. I am running ads now as a podcast host. I created my first ads. I started running them this week when I'm recording this. So I'm excited to tell you all the things that I learned. I'm experimenting, I'm playing around with the tool, and I just can't wait to see. I can't wait to share what happens. I feel very positive that it's going to be all good news whenever we figure out what's happening, how this impacted the podcast, how it grew, and all the things. So stay tuned. Like I said, be on the lookout for some YouTube videos related to Buzzsprout ads. They're going to be coming out in the next few weeks, and I'll be sure to add them to the show notes here once they are out. But reach out if you have any other questions. Like, send me a DM on Instagram, shoot me an email. I would love to know if you have anything specific that you want to see in an upcoming podcast episode or a YouTube video, because I'm learning right along with you, and I'm excited to share all the things that I figure out through this process. But that's all I have for you today. So go to the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 358 to see all the things that we talked about here today. I'm going to link to where you can start running your first podcast ad, what the requirements are, like all the things that we talked about. They're all going to be in the show notes, so go check those out. Make sure that you are subscribed or following the podcast wherever you are listening. And I would love it if you would take a screenshot wherever you're listening, share it on Instagram in your stories, tag me, and tell me your number one takeaway. I'm on Instagram at crystalprofittx, Crystal with a K. Profit has 2 F's and 2 T's, and then a TX like Texas on the very end. But again, that's all I have for you today. So as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.